I rise in this House to speak on Bill C-29. Mr. Speaker, my constituents identified 3 priorities in our riding. They have serious concerns around the needs of seniors, about housing that is affordable, and addressing the serious issue of climate change. This work has influenced my actions heavily. I'm holding seniors' town halls that will be wrapping up in January. And in a riding of my size, I will be hosting a total of 11. The need for affordable housing has been framed in my private member's bill, C-325, on the right for housing for Canadians. And this summer, we will begin the work that we have to do with our constituents around the important issue of climate change. Beyond these 3 priorities, my staff and I work hard on many challenges constituents face. Small business needs, transportation, issues around our ocean, issues with trade, and much, much more. My constituents sent me here to have a strong voice for them in this place. This is why I was very disappointed yesterday when the government reduced the time we could speak on this important bill. This bill includes 146 clauses that would amend 13 pieces of legislation. Bill C-29 was introduced in the House of Commons, and 3 days later, debate began on this past Friday. With the time allocation now, there is very little time for parliamentarians to debate its content. Time allocation provides the government with a mechanism for setting out the amount of debate a bill will receive at any given stage. When the notice is given, a short debate is had, a vote is called for, and if the motion is approved, as it was by this government, a limit for debate is established. Mr. Speaker, I take my duties of this job that I have very seriously. Part of those duties are standing in this House debating on bills before this place. During the last Parliament, New Democrats decried the Conservatives' routine habit of this procedure. A year into their Liberal mandate, and they have not copied this practice. They have outright championed it. I would like to remind the members on the governing side that Canadians expect to know how they spend their money. C-29 is a budgetary instrument, a bill that has specific changes to the Bank Act, to small businesses, Canada Child Benefit, and the Employment Insurance Act. It must be taken seriously. Specifically, the NDP is concerned by the fact that many relatively technical legislative changes, 239 pages, amending over a dozen acts, are included in a single bill, while we have not had the time needed to debate them sufficiently. In my riding, families are struggling daily. Families have to make decisions if they can afford to send their children to the swimming with their classes because they can't afford the $2 fee that the school is requesting. Mr. Speaker, families are also facing serious challenges around finding daycare. Daycare spaces are limited and the cost is often just too much. The child benefit was a step in the right direction, but the amount did not create childcare spaces or make it affordable for families. And now we see that the Canada Child Benefit will be indexed in 2020, as the Liberals have proposed, rather than listening to the so-called inadmissible amendment made in the committee to see the index to inflation each year starting January 1st, 2017. This means that each year the benefit will be worth less to Canadian families. Mr. Speaker, I have veterans who are standing outside of local businesses fundraising for their medication in my riding. Seniors who are making choices between medication, food, or paying for their heat. Where is there anything in this budget that will help these folks be able to afford their medication? Small business owners who are looking for ways to build their businesses because they see opportunities, but without the promised tax break, are finding it hard to invest in the important infrastructure or human capital that they need. Mr. Speaker, small businesses have grown in my riding and provided jobs where our larger resource-based jobs were lost. The government saying that businesses want money in people's pockets to spend in those businesses is only one part of the equation. The promised tax cut would have meant an equitable support to businesses across the country. Each area faces multiple challenges, and this tax cut would have really made a difference in my riding. In fact, the Liberals have rejected our proposals to cap transaction fees for credit cards and are doing nothing to facilitate the transfer of family businesses within the immediate family. Small businesses could not be clearer. As the job creators of this country, a cap on transaction fees for credit cards would make a real difference. Why is this government prioritizing credit card companies over small and medium-sized businesses in Canada? In my riding of North Island Powell River, it is the small and medium-sized businesses who are participating in the Chambers of Commerce, giving back to the communities at events, and employing people. It is time to give them the support that they need because they benefit us all so very much. This budget also shows a worrisome trend with this government, a hands-off approach that signals an increase in upcoming privatization schemes. This comes to us as a bit of a surprise because Budget 2016 did not include any details of a privatized Canadian infrastructure bank. It did have the term asset recycling, which we asked numerous questions about. We know that asset recycling is a financial term that involves the sale of an asset and the use of proceeds of the sale to invest into another asset. For the government, it means selling public infrastructure or privatizing it to raise money that will be used to fund other infrastructure. On October 20th, 2016, we learned that the Liberals gave Credit Suisse, an investment firm specializing in privatization, the mandate to advise the Liberals on the benefits of privatizing Canadian airports. It seems like a foregone conclusion that the recommendation will be privatization. Other pension funds are salivating at the prospect and don't even hide that it's about private ownership or private management of public assets. As Claude Lamoureux, former CEO of Ontario's Teacher Pension Plan, said on May 25th, 2016, for government, it's a way of offloading, of giving that to someone else. And in my opinion, this someone else might be more efficient than government. The roadmap is pretty clear. Sell airports and possibly other infrastructure to raise some or all of the $40 billion to be invested in the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. They hope that these public funds will attract $160 billion in private capital. Regardless of the way the bank will work, it is clear that private investors and pension funds will be asking for a return on investment, which makes sense. That's what they do. The only way to do this is to create a revenue stream, and that means imposing tolls and user fees at a rate of between 7 to 9%. What will this mean for communities across Canada? I represent many small and rural communities. The need for infrastructure is profound and often they are left behind. This scheme will not benefit the people of these small communities. How long will they have to pay tolls or user fees to get the benefit of 7 to 9% on investment? This scheme is so speculative that even President-elect Donald Trump thinks it's a great idea. Since we are on the topic of implementing certain provisions of the budget, can the government finally admit which ports, which airports, and which bridges will be privatized? What will be tolled, and which user fee can Canadians expect? These are simple questions, Mr. Speaker. My constituents who work so hard are left wondering when these costs will appear. I'm particularly concerned what this means for our smaller communities who won't be able to generate the kind of user fee revenue streams that would be attractive to investors in this bank. Why is the government taking away allocated funds for infrastructure towards a new scheme that simply won't help our communities in my riding? Mr. Speaker, during this time of year, many organizations, service groups, and people are working to make sure that the holidays will be a good one for those who are struggling to make ends meet. I remember being in Port Hardy and one member of the community showing me the food bank. He said, 20 years ago, we didn't have that. We had enough jobs. Now we have been forgotten and we fundraise to feed ourselves. Mr. Speaker, this budget could do so much more. I want to thank all those people, organizations, and service groups who are actively working to feed those across the riding who are hungry. If it be the Eagles Auxiliary, who've been fundraising for weeks now, selling food to raise money to feed those who desperately need it. The Angel Trees, where people buy a gift for a child who would go without if not for the generosity of the communities I serve. For the Community Resource Center in Powell River, the Salvation Armies, the Good Food Box program, all the food banks across the riding, Grassroots Kind Hearts, and the Beacon Club, just to mention a few. Poverty is real in our communities, and I thank all those who work every day on the ground to fight it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Bravo. Bravo. Questions and comments. Commentaire. The honourable member for St. Boniface, St. Vital.
Thank you, and I thank the honourable member for her speech. And I agree with her. Poverty is very real all across Canada. Certainly in my city, the city of Winnipeg, we have too much child poverty. That's why in 2016 I was so proud of the Canada Child Benefit. It's a more generous child benefit than what was there before. It is targeted to those who need it. The less you make, the more you will receive. And at a certain level, if you make too much, you're not going to receive anything. And probably the most important thing, though, is that it's tax-free. So if a family receives $400 for their Canada Child Benefit, they will keep $400 per month. And it will lift 300,000 children out of poverty. So my question is, as a faithful NDP member and a fine representative, how can she vote against something as beneficial to fight child poverty as the Canada Child Benefit?
Honourable member for North Island, Powell River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. Mr. Speaker, the reality for so many families is facing multiple challenges around poverty. You know, when I knocked on doors, I talked to many women who had quit their jobs because they simply could not afford to pay daycare and work because there was not affordable daycare. And that meant that they were sacrificing opportunities for them in their own career. And so they felt hopeless, like there was no way forward for their family. They wanted to provide a good opportunity for the future of their children and their family, and they couldn't. So my answer through you, Mr. Speaker, is, first of all, it was a step in the right direction. We want to make sure that families are getting the resources they need to meet the needs of their family. But it does not have any impact on having affordable childcare, for having the seats that are so badly needed in my riding and everywhere else, and you didn't index it. You're not going to until 2020, and that is a shame.
Hear, hear. Questions and comments? The honourable member for Spadina, Fort York.
I heard and listened with great interest about the need for childcare, and I hope the member opposite recognizes that we were a matter of days away from a national daycare strategy when the party opposite chose to pull the trigger on a minority government and defeated a national daycare program, and for that they should be held responsible. You could have waited. You could have waited, and you could have delivered that and $2.7 billion for housing, and you could have delivered the Kelowna Accord, and you could have delivered so much to this country if you just had a little patience. But my question is this. I've heard the NDP rail against private-public partnerships ever since we started talking about the infrastructure bank. There's a project on Bay Street, a street they love to point fingers at in Toronto, that requires a public-private partnership to succeed. It requires the sale of a public asset, parking lot, the redesign and reconstruction of the GO Bus terminal in a new office tower that will be built by a Quebec pension fund. The profits from this project will not only deliver a new park over the rail corridor, it will also build a new ferry terminal, one of the most important pieces of infrastructure for the working class in Toronto. That ferry terminal cannot be built without a public partnership, with a public-private partnership. It's called the Jack Layton Ferry Terminal. Would they like us to cancel the Jack Layton Ferry Terminal? Is that what they're actually saying in their opposition?
The honourable member for North Island, Powell River. Order.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for his very impassioned question. I would just like to take the opportunity to remind him that it is 2016 and something that happened 13 years ago is something we should let go of and really deal with the issue that we need to see a real change in providing affordable childcare. This is something that people across this country are asking for, and as government, I believe it's their job to listen. And you know what? If we're going to talk about a privatized bank for infrastructure, my response is very simple. If this was the plan from the Liberal government all along, why was it not clearly spelt out in their campaign? If they were so afraid to tell Canadians what their plan was, why didn't they make sure to inform them as they should have? Because that's what we do when we campaign. We put forward a plan and we're transparent. And if they want to talk about transparency, maybe they should try it a little more. Here.